Welcome back, my lords and ladies, to the Cast Beyond the Wall. We are your guides to all things Westerosi, and we're here to bring you a review, analysis, and fan v fan debate on each episode of HBO's hit show, Game of Thrones. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and I promised to podcast for the living. This goes beyond just brand building. This is about relevancy. I am so excited that today we'll be giving you our initial review for Season 8, Episode 2, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, before jumping into a scene-by-scene breakdown of the episode. But of course, I can't do it alone. From the Dornish lands of Arizona, sir, introduce yourself.
My name is Austin Lucari, and guys, normally I'm a Scotch man, but I've been really inspired today to drink some milk. I have like the biggest glass of milk, and I've just been chugging it, and it's just like pouring down my face. It's crazy. But strong bone does the body good, right?
Hey, Austin, you got some in your beard. If you just hold on, let me get the bib.
Just right there? Right there?
Yeah, right there.
I get it.
I watched the milk. I hear you get sick, and I can't have you out sick during a podcast recording. But fortunately, in case you do get sick, we are also joined by from the Starkish lands of Kentucky. Sir, introduce yourself.
I'm Daniel Stoll, and this episode was really emotional. There's a lot of moments that I teared up. The worst moment for me probably came towards the end. I was really, really sad for Gilly. All of her brothers came to Winterfell, and she didn't get to see any of them. It was such a heartbreaking moment. Like, they're just all standing out there, and she's just like asleep with Sam somewhere.
She's not letting them in, huh? She even brought the party favors were even there, and she still didn't let them in, huh? Listeners, you've gotten used to hearing the three of us for the last two episodes, doing the three of us doing a little preview and recap of episode 1. We have a rotating guest host spot for our fourth voice at the table. Today, I'm very excited to introduce you to a longtime guest. He's been around since the beginning of this podcast, all the way back. If you go back before the White Walkers were born, and you look, you will find our closest podcast friend, none other than Sir Ben Friend. Welcome back, Ben Friend, to the Cast Beyond the Wall.
Thank you, sirs. Thank you. I'm happy to join you once again from the freezing cold lands of Chicago, where, look, we may struggle with the weather. We may struggle with corruption and backstabbing in true Game of Thrones fashion. But I like to think that we would at least be smart enough to understand that if we are trying to keep our loved ones safe from a bunch of dead people, we shouldn't put them underground with all the dead people.
Thank you for pointing that out. I can't believe nobody mentioned that.
See, this is why we have you on, Ben. We need you to tell us straight. We need you to tell us the obvious facts that everyone's overlooking, which is, why would you put all the women and children next to all the dead people when you're fighting the dead people?
That's some good old-fashioned Midwestern common sense for your ass.
Ben Friend, with his superior knowledge of the inner workings of inner city corruption and politics of Chicago, is here to bring you, the listener, and us some really great analysis of this week's episode, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. That's right. This was the 69th episode, guys. This was Game of Thrones episode 69. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us again today. And if you care to keep up with any more of our podcasts here on the Cast Beyond the Wall, you can follow us on social media, on Twitter at cast_beyond_GOT, or on Facebook at facebook.com/Cast Beyond the Wall. If you really enjoy this episode, you can subscribe on any of your preferred podcast apps. One thing I haven't actually acknowledged in show, it's been on our social media channels, but we're where the cool kids are, which means we're on Spotify. It's where all the hip young kids are at right now. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're a Spotify user, do me a solid and go listen to that on Spotify.
Back in my day, we used Windows Media Player, and we liked it.
Windows Media what?
Windows Media Player. How old are you?
I'm younger than you, I can tell you that much.
Now, Caleb, is this episode going to be available for download on LimeWire? It's FrostWire now, isn't it? Winter has come. It's FrostWire.
If you are listening to the podcast and you want to participate in the final season of the show, we are collecting audio memories all season long We want to hear what you, the listener, what is some of your favorite moments from the television show Game of Thrones that we're talking about, or what is some of your favorite moments from the podcast, The Cast Beyond the Wall, that we have done over the years. Of course, how could you possibly forget the heartbreak that was Austin Lucar reacting to Oberyn Martell? A lot of great stuff there. Or you could look no further than the time Sam lived. Any of those times Austin reacted to that. Great moments I would love to hear about, you talk about on the show. And the easiest way for you to do that is actually by submitting your audio memory using voice memos if you're using an iPhone, or if you have a non-iPhone, I recommend downloading some sort of very simple recording app. Record that, export it, and email it to castbeyondthewall@live.com. And if you don't want to be heard audibly on the show later this season, listener emails they're okay. They're just all right. They're all right by me. So you can email your theories, your questions, your comments to castbeyondthewall@live.com. Without further ado, let's get down to business. We've got so much stuff to cover. A Night of the Seven Kingdoms was an episode for the ages, and I can't wait to delve into it with you. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into our review and recap of Season 8, Episode 2, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms.
When I was a child, my brother would tell me a bedtime story about the man who murdered our father. About all the things we would do to that man. He never should have trusted Cersei. You never should have either.
Death. It's not many faces. I look forward to seeing this one.
How long do we have? Before the sun comes up tomorrow.
Ben, before we go any further, I have to get your hot take on the season so far. I know we're only in the second episode, but I want to know, what have you thought of the first 2 episodes of Season 8? Have they lived up to the hype? Do you think it's been a good time? Do you think it's been a notable improvement, or maybe not an improvement over last season? What do you think?
Okay. Well, first of all, in terms of it being an improvement, I will say that I am one of the few defenders of Season 7. I do think that it had problems with pacing and with kind of the weird fast travel aspect that reared its ugly head in Season 7 especially, but Season 6 as well. But I enjoyed... I think it had a lot of really strong character moments, and I think it got everybody where they needed to be. With that said, the first episode of the season, I thought maybe leaned a little too heavily into nostalgia, leaned a little bit too heavily into our memories of the first season, particularly the first episode. And so I thought it was a little bit shaky as far as a premiere episode. That said, I enjoyed this episode so much. I thought it was fantastic, and obviously we'll get into it, but it kind of made me rethink the way that I was seeing this season, because it's obvious that the writers and the showrunners are very interested in making sure that we remember where our characters came from, so that we are that much more emotionally invested in where they're going to go. Even for the hardcore fans who feel like, oh, I do a rewatch of this series every year, it doesn't hurt to understand that, on a tangible level, how far these characters have come and what survivors they are. So especially this episode was very strong. It remains to be seen the rest of the season, but so far so good, I think.
Excellent. So overall, you'd say, how did you feel with this episode in particular?
Incredibly strong. I think that this was an example of this show doing what it does best, which is focusing in on the human element within this giant fantasy landscape. And I think in the last couple seasons, as there has been such a shuffle to the finish line, my fear was that this season, especially with its abridged episode count, wouldn't take the time to really dial into these characters that we love and pick their brains and give them a little bit of time to be themselves and to reflect. And so I think this was exactly what the doctor ordered in terms of shoring up confidence in the rest of the season, and in just delivering an episode that somebody who, like myself, who's been a longtime fan, was just thrilled to see was still being made this late in the show's life.
We're going to pass it to Austin Lucari. What did you think of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms?
Yeah, I did think it was a good episode. It felt it seems like the general idea is that everyone kind of really loves this episode, and I agree with them. It gives us a lot of moments that really are what made Game of Thrones great to begin with. But those moments in the past are always mixed in with like some action and things that kind of furthered the plot a bit more. This season, the way they've done things, and really it has been for the past 2 seasons, it feel really segmented in the moments where we're getting like really, really good character development and really good character moments, interactions between characters that we hadn't seen interact before. And moments where we're furthering the plot. I think where previous seasons did it better, it kind of intermingled that. Things flowed really smoothly between, big action scenes and things that move the plot forward, and moments where we got the kind of character moments that make the show what it is. So while this is exactly what the show needed in this season, I kind of wish it was dispersed a little bit throughout this entire season rather than compacted into one episode.
Daniel, what do you think?
I absolutely love this episode. And, when the episode first finished, my thoughts were, wow, that was a really good episode. And then I thought about it, and then I talked to my wife about it, then I went to sleep. Then I thought more about it all day, and the more that I thought about it, the more that I liked this episode. And I already started off in a really good spot. I really liked the premiere last week, and I feel like this just built on that, and maybe even made it, took what it did last week and made something even better this week. And so I absolutely loved it. I felt like the writing and the dialogue was really on point, and sort of to Ben's point a little earlier, it did kind of feel reminiscent of some of those maybe dialogue scenes that we saw in earlier seasons, maybe specifically like season 3, season 4 era. And I felt like it really hit those spots for me, which is one of the reasons I really loved Game of Thrones. It's just a bunch of characters in a room talking, and that's all this episode was. But I was so invested in every moment. All the emotional beats really, really hit home to me. I teared up on several different scenes throughout this episode, and so for me, it was just an absolutely phenomenal episode. It's definitely, for me, on a personal level, maybe not on a plot-wise, technical level, but for me, on an emotional level, it's going to be one of the shining episodes as I look back onto the show for me.
Excellent. So I definitely am going to lean. I might be the person who likes it the most at the table, or at least lean most closely towards Ben, because I think this is. It's really easy to buy into the hype and say every episode is the best episode I've ever seen. But here's the thing: I think that this episode, A Night in the Seven Kingdoms, is probably in my top 5, because like Daniel, I've been thinking about this nonstop since it aired. And I absolutely love that it goes back to the roots of what made Game of Thrones great. Before we had battle sequences, before we had Blackwater and the Battle at the Wall, or we had the big events like the Mountain and the Viper, the thing that made the show great was just how well written the dialogue was, the character dynamics. The fact that you get to spend a lot of time with these characters to learn about their histories, their families' histories, where they come from. This particular episode falls in my top 5 because this is the end of the road. There are a lot of these episodes we saw early on, specifically I would say in the first 4 seasons or the first 3 seasons, and this is the type of episode I don't think we've seen much of, hardly at all, in the last 2 to 3 seasons. As I remember, it's probably the first episode of its kind that we've seen since season 4, and I just love it because this is the end of the road. We get to see the payoff for Brienne of Tarth and all of her, but both defending Jaime and also being knighted by Jaime. It's the perfect I or T at the end of her journey. And the reason this episode works so well, the reason these interactions work so perfectly, is because we have spent so much time over the last 7 to 8 seasons with these characters. We're not just getting if this was we aren't just getting allusions to, hey, this is where this character has been. We know, we were there. We watched it all unfold, over 69 hours of television. So I think this is an exceptional episode because I feel like it was simultaneously nostalgic and a throwback to the thing that I've really missed from Game of Thrones in recent years, as we've kind of shifted more towards an event-driven, more more event-driven show that was kind of heading towards an end. But also I felt like it gave us a lot of new interactions using that same style and technique we saw in earlier years. And I have to note that one of the reasons it probably feels so similar to one of those older episodes is it was written by a longtime Game of Thrones writer, Brian Cogman. Some of the most notable episodes he's written were Season 3's Kissed by Fire, which upon my rewatch is probably another one of my favorite episodes of the show. Oathkeeper, and the Laws of Gods and Men. That's the Tyrion trial episode. So some of my favorite moments of Game of Thrones are in Brian Cogman episodes, and I feel like this is no exception. Yes, it was low on action. Yes, it was low on spectacle, but I'm pretty confident we're going to get all we can handle next week. So this was kind of a nice deep breath before the plunge, and one last hurrah with these characters before several of them are no longer with us. And it's something I've missed quite a bit in recent years. Do you think that this single location was worth the time? I've actually seen a lot of folks on the internet saying, why are we spending so much time with sitting in rooms when we have to wrap it up? So for the table, I guess we'll start with you, Stoll. Do you think that this single location and spending an entire episode of people just talking in rooms was worth it?
I absolutely do. I think what drives the show is the characters and their motivations on why they do what they do, and what informs their decision making. And as you mentioned, a lot of character points kind of get nicely wrapped up, and with this epic battle coming where many characters will probably die, it feels nice to at least get some resolution on a lot of these characters. Brienne being knighted, her arc has kind of come full circle for her. Theon coming back to Winterfell to defend Bran when he took it from Bran to start off back in season 1. I mean, you have all, I think, is well worth the time because it makes it so much more impactful in the next episode when we see them. If they do die or if they make it, it's the context for all those character moments that makes it all worth it. If they die or if they move on or whatever ends up happening. So for me, it was absolutely.
Yeah, to Daniel's point, I think that for me, as a lover of this show, the moments that I'm going to remember when it's over are the interactions between the characters that I loved. And the moments that I'm going to regret not happening when the show is over will have nothing to do with battle sequences, great spectacle. It's going to be, man, we never got a resolution to, these two characters' dynamics, or these two characters never shared a scene or never shared a scene again. And in this episode, we got a ton of satisfying resolutions. We had Jaime and Bran. We had Theon returning. We had, we even got a scene between Jorah and Lyanna. I mean, just little things like that, for someone who lives for the character interaction and the character dynamics in this show, it's almost like, and I'm sure this argument has been made, it is a type of fan service in this episode. But I think probably with 4 episodes left, it's going to be boom, 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 probably nothing but spectacle, probably nothing but a roller coaster until this show is over. So I think lingering on these important, quiet moments now and reminding us who these characters are and why we love them, yeah, absolutely. I think time is going to be really kind to this episode once the season and the show is all said and done.
The thing that separates Game of Thrones, and to Ben's point, is the fact that we know these characters, I feel like, so much better, and the fact that these Game of Thrones is a lot messier than traditional fantasy. And it's moments like this episode, and things still aren't, even though there's payoffs, these things aren't necessarily wrapped up as cleanly as we'd like with some of these subplots. It's a nice reminder of what it is about Game of Thrones that I love. I was probably moved to tears at no less than 4 times in the episode. And to your point, though, yes, I don't think that spectacle in Game of Thrones is great, but in my mind, it's always really supported these types of episodes and these types of benchmarks and big moments in the character journeys for our characters. So yeah, I think this was 100% necessary and well worth the time that we took to spend with these characters one last time for many of them. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into our recap. As you can tell, listener, we are very pro this episode around the table to varying degrees. But let's jump right into the first scene, one that I think we were all extra anxious to get to. This episode didn't take any time to hop right into the action, and that is the trial, so to speak, of Jaime Lannister. Now, this is a Jaime Lannister who has few friends in the room. I would venture to say almost everyone in this room has a reason to hate his guts, even some of his defenders. So let's go ahead and get takes from around the table. What did you guys make of this particular scene? Austin, Jaime Lannister on trial. Did it pay off? Did it live up to kind of what we'd hoped? Did you think it really set up the rest of the episode pretty well?
I mean, it was all right. It was good to see it. I don't think it was as scathing of a trial as I kind of hoped for. It was pretty quick to turn around and everyone defend Jaime. When in reality, Jaime kind of kicked off this entire war through his actions. Brandon never spoke up. Was kind of hoping to see him speak, but we find out a little bit later that Bran doesn't actually care about what happened anymore because he feels like it was actually in the best interest of everything. Overall, it was just all right, in my opinion.
Just all right. Okay, Daniel Stoll, what did you make of this scene?
I like the scene. I think, as I just talked about how great this episode was, I think to Austin's point, it felt like there could have been a little more. It felt like he kind of it ended a little quickly, I guess. And we just talked about how much time we were spending, with all these characters or whatever. But I feel like maybe they could have spent a little more time really getting into some of the things that Jaime has done. And while we have that Dany moment, Brienne jumps up there pretty quick to start defending. And as soon as Brienne starts to defend Jaime, Sansa's immediately trusting in her, and Jon immediately, says, "Hey, we need the numbers." So it felt like we could have lingered there a little bit longer, but overall, it was an effective scene. I think there was nothing necessarily wrong with it. I think maybe we could have spent a little extra time there, but overall, it was good.
All right, yeah, Ben, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the scene is good, but I completely agree with Daniel and Austin in the sense that, man, oh man, Jaime Lannister got off easy in this scene. For everything that he's done over the course of this series and for as many enemies as he had in that room. And I think maybe there's an argument to be made that because of the extenuating circumstances and everybody's fear about the army of the dead, that, maybe everybody was just feeling a little more forgiving. My rebuttal to that would be, then why is it that Tyrion is the one getting his ass handed to him in this scene? Somehow the other Lannister brother is the one who catches most of the vitriol in this scene.
And that ties back to a larger criticism an ongoing criticism we've had on this podcast. Actually, the last couple of seasons, Tyrion's been kind of not the Tyrion we love and know. And I know, listen here, you kill the woman you love and your dad in one night, it probably screws you up and throws you off your game. But he's been acting like last season, especially, not making the best decisions. Trusting Cersei, I think we all, at least between Daniel, Austin, and I thought, wow, that's really uncharacteristic of Tyrion to trust his sister despite the whole pregnancy thing. So, yeah, I mean, he kind of deserved the flag, I think, to some degree, except for I still go back to the fact that it always felt uncharacteristic. The things he was getting criticized for, while I think are valid criticisms, always felt uncharacteristic in the first place. I don't know. It's very strange.
Yeah, I kind of agree to that point. It does feel like there's a little bit of a writing issue more so than it is like a Tyrion specific issue. Yes, he makes these mistakes, but it felt like he was kind of, as to your point, Caleb, not written as well as he had had in previous seasons. So
it just seems to me like maybe the show doesn't know what to do with him anymore. And because Peter Dinklage is, such a master, and because we know this character and we love him, I think it's easy for us to gloss over it. But yeah, essentially for the last 3 seasons, he has just sort of been, if not acting completely out of character, his arc seems to be that he is completely off his game and that he doesn't know what he's doing anymore. He doesn't know who to trust anymore. He's not useful anymore. I hope maybe we get another great moment for him where if he doesn't, save the day, he does something that is like extreme, like is like integral to the plot of this season in a way that is clever and in a way that is helpful or productive, not bumbling. Because it seems like, what he's been used for lately is just to make a bad decision so that it sets up another conflict, and he feels bad about it. But we don't get anything from him character-wise because of it.
Right. And like whenever he makes those missteps, you're like, wait, the Tyrion we knew in earlier seasons would never make that mistake. And he just seems off his game. And it sometimes seems, even with him being off his game, it seems extra uncharacteristic. I mean, I dare not speak of the venture to go rescue the zombie beyond the wall, that whole plan, which, that's a whole several other podcasts we've talked about it. But it's like, you're like, would you really do that? And then go walking into King's Landing to try to like negotiate with his sister. I was like, would you really do that? So, I mean, it is for, I just feel like I think all the characters have in recent years been victims of the plot in one way or another, but I think Tyrion might be one of the worst, one of the victims that's been hit the hardest. And then it seems like the show's trying to recover by like writing that as like, oh, well, yeah, that's part of his arc now, was that he was stupid, and we're going to try to correct it in that way. And it just feels weird.
I was going to say, I will give the show credit to some degree for that scene last week when Sansa was like, man, I used to think you were the smartest guy in the world. And at least the show understands that he's been kind of useless. But I don't know. I hope they have something up their sleeves. I still love him. I just wish that he were worth something these days. But anyway.
Right. And Daenerys says that in the scene with Sansa, literally, hey, I recruited this guy because he was smart, he was ruthless, he didn't make mistakes, and like it seems like ever since he's been on her team, every season he's made mistakes. Going back to season 6, he tried to negotiate with the slave owners and like on how to get rid of slavery. Anyway, yeah, it's been a ride. But to bring it back to Jaime, I think I like this scene a little more than everyone at the table. I do agree it was very rushed. I thought the tension, while short-lived, was really strong. And I do admire the fact that Jaime Lannister basically said, yeah, I'm not sorry for any of the stuff I did. I would do it again, with the exception of Bran. And that's the one time Bran says the things we do for love. And you're like, oh, he doesn't, no one knows what that means. But that was the only thing that Nikolai Coster-Waldau, terrific acting with the eyes and with the facial expression. But just that was the only moment where he says, I'm not sorry for any of it. I do it all again, except for that thing. And he doesn't say it, but you just see it in his face when Bran says that. He's like, oh, crap. I don't have much more to add to the scene. It sounds like we were all pretty satisfied with the outcome.
Yeah. One more thing I wanted to add. Do we think that Jon Snow is so willing to kind of shrug Jaime's transgressions off because he really does just think they need another person to help them fight the dead? Or do we think that maybe in light of recent revelations, he's more willing to forgive somebody for acts of incest?
Wow, I had not considered that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I could understand where he's coming from. It's a particularly tempting incest that he's got going on there.
He's like, listen, we got us ancestors. I don't think that's a word. Us ancestors have to stick together.
I will say one point, because I feel like about this scene that I think we should at least mention is there is the moment where, Sansa does say, okay, well, I completely trust Brienne, and Dany has already kind of made it clear that she wants to do something to Jaime. And so then Dany looks towards Jon and says, well, what does the Warden of the North say? She kind of dismisses Sansa's point about her saying, I completely trust Brienne. If she says keep Jaime alive, I can agree with that. Dany dismisses it and says, what does the Warden of the North say? And I think that's sort of a theme as we talk about this episode is Dany really having a lot of moments where she is like dismissive of other people in this episode, and also where she recognizes that other people are committed to this fight, not for her, but for other people.
I don't think she was expecting a conversation as much as she was expecting to say, yeah, so we should just toast you alive and kill you or send you away. Well, and you could also take it as a slight. Jon Snow, yes, believing they need more people to fight, but also he's kind of in an awkward spot in his head with Daenerys. And notice he doesn't even make eye contact when he walks out of the room afterwards. I feel like Daenerys was using that to ask for permission. She was like, hey, this guy's a bad guy. Sansa, what do you think? And Sansa's like, yeah, point, I'm backing you up. But then Brienne sticks up for Jaime, which, oh, by the way, I think it's worth acknowledging. It was fast, but Brienne, that was a really emotional scene. She put herself out there and just, stood up for the man she knew. I thought that was really great. And so when Sansa didn't give Dany the permission, she's like, all right, Ward into the North, what do you think? And he also is like, for totally different reasons, is like, nah, I think he's good. And she was very angry when she left the council chambers, and of course, she also threw Tyrion under the bus as well. So clearly, that was not how she wanted it to go. So we've already talked about how Dany calls Tyrion out for being dumb, and Tyrion does make the comment. I suspect one of you will be wearing this, meaning the kind of the Hand of the King badge when this is all over, and he's talking to Varys and Jorah. But I do want to talk a little bit about how Arya pays a quick visit to Gendry. This is something we're going to come back to later in the episode, but I wanted to get your take on this. Do you guys think that this weapon that Gendry is making for Arya is going to be that cool? I mean, what did you make of this first exchange between the two of them? And we'll start with you, Ben, on this one.
I have no idea what the hell to make of this thing that she's having him make. I've looked over the drawing that she gave him last week over and over, trying to understand what it is that this thing does. I'm sure it will be cool, and I hope it will be practical, given that she is like, a world-class assassin now. But I don't know. It would have to be like pretty cool and pretty efficient to be worth the trouble, given that she is not only that good with a sword, but she apparently has incredibly good dagger throwing skills, with perfect precision. So yeah, I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if it's something that she really has dreamed up because she thinks it will be like the most efficient weapon, or honestly, if it's just like part of like a little dance that they're doing, because this scene and the scenes with them last week, they're talking about weapons and they're talking about smithing, but they're flirting. I mean, it's very flirtatious. So it's almost like it's beside the point what it is they're actually talking about. It's the subtext.
Well, I just want to say my prediction is it's going to be a Darth Maul style dual-bladed dragon spear with dragon glass that she can then, do all the cool flips and shit, just like Darth Maul. But then she can actually, I think if I see it correctly, I think she can like split it in two. Like, so it could be like a staff that she can also crack into two different ones, like separate to use like swords. So that's my prediction. I think I haven't seen enough to know for sure, but yes, Austin, to your point, set up for more, and we'll come back to that later. But first, we have to talk about long-awaited scene that went in a completely different direction. I think any of us would have predicted in previous years. Jaime and Bran meeting in the gardens next to the weirwood tree. And Jaime apologizes to Bran, which you're like, oh man, that's a big moment for Jaime. And Bran just does not care. He's like, yeah, if you hadn't done that, you wouldn't be who you are today. You probably would have been the same guy who pushed me out the window in the first place. And I wouldn't be me. I would still be Brandon Stark, which again, the fact that he keeps referring to Brandon Stark as a separate person or past person is very strange. Austin, any thoughts on the scene with Jaime and Bran? This also might be a great time for us to talk about Bran in general. I teased last week that we were going to elaborate on our thoughts on Bran as a character this season.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he's very much the Doctor Strange of the Westeros universe. He has kind of seen what he believes will be the ideal circumstances to have a victory. And I believe he's trying to coordinate that in his own way without divulging the information to everyone else. He, as you kind of referenced last week, Caleb, he's not really Bran anymore. He's something else. He's the three-eyed raven. He doesn't really care what Jaime did. He doesn't care what anybody did. He's only interested, seemingly, in saving Westeros. There's some debate to that as well. Like maybe his motivations aren't as pure as we think they are. And that's something we're going to have to see as we go down the round. I think he is actually trying to save, the greater good. What that means, we'll find out later.
All right, Ben. So last week, I posed the idea that Bran was not trustworthy because we don't really know much about him, what's going on in his head, what his powers are, what his motives as the three-eyed raven are. We know he's the three-eyed raven, but what does that even mean? We don't really fully understand what the role of that thing is in Westeros. So, what do you think about Bran's new position and what role he's going to play in kind of the upcoming battle?
I will say that my interpretation of the character that he's become is that, he is a neutral presence, which is to say he has no emotional investment in anything that is to come, except for one thing, which is that he wants to make sure that he himself is protected because he holds the memories of the world. That being said, I don't know how particularly useful he will be in terms of saving anybody else. I doubt we're going to find out there's any malicious intent or that his motives are impure. But as Austin was saying, he's this cold, unfeeling, not void, but he's kind of this Dr. Manhattan type figure, which is probably the best thing I could say, which is that he sees everything at once and it makes it impossible for him to connect to any of it. And that's sort of how I see him. He would probably be completely fine with any outcome as long as I think essentially there's some kind of civilization that exists that, isn't, the dead roaming the earth. So yeah, that's my take on it. I don't know that we're going to find out that there's anything malicious going on there.
Okay. I think that's good. I think you guys are very optimistic fellows, which is really weird. Said optimistic and Austin in the same kind of breath here. So, but Daniel, that leaves me with you. I'm gonna pass it back off to you, and you also have to answer the question: if Bran Stark is Doctor Strange predicting the one possible outcome of success, or he's Dr. Manhattan seeing all things at once, who is Jaime Lannister? Is he Tony Stark?
I don't know if I have an answer to that question. But what I will say is, I think, as you mentioned, Caleb, that I think the important piece here in this particular scene is the Jaime apologizing. I don't know if we've seen Jaime apologize in the show for anything he's ever done. And even in the scene before, he was like, I don't apologize for anything, blah, blah, blah. And so that was like a big moment for Jaime to come to this realization that he has made some mistakes. And, I know he knows that. And he, I think about the bathtub scene with Brienne, where he talks about, the Mad King and all these things, and he's been criticized his whole life for all these decisions that he felt like he was doing right and for good reasons. So for him to come to terms with that and say, you know what, that wasn't, I did this for Cersei because I loved her, but I shouldn't have done it, and I'm sorry. It's a big moment for him. In regards to Bran, I think I'm a little bit between Ben and Austin and you, Caleb. I think maybe not malicious, but I think he definitely has this idea of the way things should happen, or what can happen in the way that should, like, I don't know. He knows something that he's not revealing that information. It feels like to me. I don't necessarily think it's malicious. I think maybe there could be something deeper there, but that maybe we can't trust him. But overall, I think he knows some information and he just is not revealing that.
But how boring of an episode would that be if Bran laid out the entire ending of the series? Like,
Oh yeah,
so
yeah, that'd be terrible.
yeah, I mean, he knows what's going on. He has a plan. He's trying to orchestrate it in some way. Much, like Doctor Strange in my mind, like just trying to make sure that the one possible outcome that leads them to victory happens.
Him being so quiet and not saying anything, but yet talking about kind of the Night King knowing where he's at. Like he's very strategic with where he places information. Now, one could say that's the writers being lazy writers, which would not be totally unfounded. Baelish. Or it could be that Bran is intentionally keeping very quiet because he doesn't want to tip people off as to what's about to happen. But I don't know. We will see. Now, to Daniel's point, though, I did find this scene to be very touching for Jaime. Again, it's really weird that he didn't really get that. It wasn't really received in the way you'd expect because, Bran is Bran. But it was a big step when you think back to season 1 Jaime, who was riding around King's Landing, fighting Ned Stark in the streets, pushing kids out of the window without a second thought, really. I mean, this is a huge character growth and change for him. And he even says, that's not the man I am. I'm not the same man anymore. And I just think that's really powerful that he recognizes that. But let's move on to this fairly first half of the episode, which is Jaime checking in with literally everybody. So the next scene is Tyrion meeting with Jaime in the courtyard. They've got a lot of fun exchanges. I think that Jaime raises the point about the pregnancy. She's always been good at using the truth to tell lies. But then Tyrion calls him out and says, "She never fooled you. You knew exactly what she was, and you loved her anyway." Great line, great comeback. And this is why I'm going to beg the question before we move on to the next scene is, do we, with this statement out there from Jaime, do we think Cersei is pregnant? Ben, we haven't talked to you about this one yet. We in the past have been very skeptical of the pregnancy, but I want to know what you think. Do you think she's legitimately pregnant? And if so, what that could mean for kind of the future episodes?
Be careful with the we pronoun, all right? I have not been skeptical.
Well, you are going to be alone though, because I've been skeptical of it since the last season. I felt like she was being way too obvious with the rubbing of her stomach, and I just felt like she was milking it, and she was doing it at moments where it would benefit her. In conversations with Jaime about what the Lannister army was going to do and their safety beyond when Daenerys made her way to King's Landing. Suddenly she's talking about being pregnant. In the scene with Tyrion, when she realizes that maybe her way out of this situation is to lie and say she's going to accept the truce and send the armies north. She starts rubbing her stomach. Tyrion realizes she's pregnant, and it works to her advantage. I will say this, even if I am skeptical that she was actually pregnant and that Jaime would have been the father, I don't think it's impossible to think she might be pregnant now because of Euron. There's only 4 episodes left in this show, so we're not going to get like a full-blown knockdown, drag-out paternity battle or anything.
It's not the last 3 episodes. That's what I was expecting. It was all going to be a court case, be like Law and Order.
You are not the father.
Maury's cameo is going to be off the hook.
All right. So, Austin, it sounds like you're still on the wagon of she is pregnant.
Yeah, I do believe she is pregnant. Because I just think it's weird for them to. It's like very Days of Our Lives to fake a pregnancy. It's just a weird storyline to go down. I do believe she is pregnant, but it doesn't matter. She's dead within the next 2 episodes. It's not like the baby's ever born. She becomes like a White Walker zombie person, and it doesn't matter.
I mean, I think I do err on the side of being skeptical. I mean, as to Ben's point, both of the times she mentions being pregnant, it seems to be some sort of emotional manipulation that really works in her advantage in both scenarios. You have Tyrion all of a sudden trusting her, which he got a lot of crap for this episode. And when Jaime decides to trust her, he ends up making decisions for her when he's considering not to doing that. So I think, but also to Austin's point, I don't think it's going to really matter if she is or not in the end. We're not going to see the outcome of that. I don't think it was just her being, manipulative in those moments, but it's not going to really matter in the end, I don't think.
So whether pregnant, she's not. It sounds like we all agree that there's not going to be any sort of actual impact outside of her manipulating people. Like it's just there to be used as a weapon for her to manipulate those closest to her. And okay, but there's no way this baby is born though.
I agree. Yeah, there's no way because she's dead very, very, very soon, and we'll talk about why we believe that.
So let's take a look at a really fun segue. Again, Jaime talks to Bran, Jaime talks to Tyrion, and then Jaime talks to Brienne in the courtyard. And it seems that Podrick has gotten much better at fighting, which is great. And we have Jaime who, in another really just humbling moment for his character, comes and talks to Brienne, and they're having an adult conversation, and she calls him out. We've never had a conversation this long without you insulting me. What do you want? And he says, I want to serve under you in the battle against the dead. And again, hugely powerful moment because he's always been a knight or the commander of the army. He has never really, served under anyone in that level. I mean, Brienne's going to be basically on the front lines. They're saying the left flank, but she was talking about being on a hill outside of the castle. So, this is Jaime offering himself up, basically sacrificing his life, going on the front lines to fight to the death with Brienne against the White Walkers. Really moving stuff. And Brienne she doesn't actually give an answer and walks away. So we're going to talk more about Jaime and Brienne later in the episode, but I found this to be a very touching moment as well. I know we've already said it. Jaime's grown as a character. It's really, really a nice moment. But is there anything any of you guys would like to note on this particular scene?
Yeah, I got something. Don't you think it's an official promotion that Podrick is training the soldiers? Because I feel like it's an official promotion worthy of points.
He went from Squire level 1 to Squire level 3. Do you count level ups
he went from
as
like
actual
Squire
promotions?
level 1 to army trainer person. Okay, that's points.
He didn't prestige or anything like that. He's just better. So I don't know if that counts as a promotion.
That aside, are we shipping Jaime and Brienne like officially now? Because I feel like we are.
Caleb has been shipping them since season 2. So you're
to be fair, but he's
not changed
he's
at all.
fresh out of a breakup, right? Like he's on a rebound.
Yeah, but he's realizing that the woman he needed has been under his nose the whole time. She represents everything.
Over his nose. She is significantly taller than him.
She is over all of our noses. She represents everything that Cersei is not. And their relationship represents everything that he's not had with Cersei. Cersei and he enable each other's worst impulses and instincts. And Brienne challenged him consistently. And she was, especially before he lost his hand, she was one of the only people in the world who could go toe-to-toe with him. And you have to think maybe this is something he's been reflecting on as he's been reflecting on the kind of man that he was and the kind of man he wants to be, that this is a woman that he should put his love and his trust behind. This is his way. This and the big scene later, this is his way of moving forward, I think. Yeah, he's fresh out of a breakup, but I would not call this a rebound. Like this is the one true pairing, as the kids would say.
His soulmate.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Ben. I think you nailed it exactly right. The opposite of Cersei and Brienne is just says a lot about where Jaime is now, and the fact that it turns to her. And this scene is kind of setting up for that later scene that we see later a little bit. But I agree with you 100%, Ben, that difference there is really powerful in this scene.
Well, just think she's been the one like the truest knight we've had on the show consistently since the beginning. She was loyal to Renly, who died, and then was loyal to Lady Catelyn, and she was so committed to that oath that even though Lady Catelyn had died, she was still committed to protecting her daughters, and she stuck with it. She's been honorable. She hasn't given up. She's been persistent, and really an incredible foil for Jaime, who basically had all the knighthood and all the privileges and all the training he needed handed to him, versus Brienne of Tarth, who had to work her whole life to even have a chance. And because of the patriarchy in that society, she couldn't even properly become a knight. Again, it's like the idea of Jaime was just handed all this stuff. And, again, as he's reflected on who he is, has been said over the years, he's probably said, that Brienne, she is an honorable person. She is, and she didn't give up on me. She was willing to keep. We were still friends. I mean, I think back even to season 6. There's that great piece when Jaime is attacking Riverrun as Brienne is there representing Sansa, trying to recruit the soldiers in Riverrun, and they still meet in the camp beforehand as friends and talk about what's going on. And then he says, "I'm going to let you in, but just know that if we take that city, you're going to be on the other side." I mean, it's just a really beautiful relationship that I feel like has come full circle, and to see it make both of them better people is just ship it so hard, Austin. I'm not even apologizing. And you know what that means, though. We'll get to it later, but when you ship it this hard, there's going to be some bittersweet tragedy coming soon. So especially in Game of Thrones. But let's go ahead and move on. We'll come back, put a pin in it. We'll come back to that later in the episode. Let's get to the next piece, which is so basically Jorah comes into Daenerys, which shout out to Jorah. He actually had real lines this week as opposed to just standing there awkwardly letting Daenerys take shits on Sam. And says, hey, firstly, you should forgive Tyrion. He's a smart guy, comes to his defense. And then he says, but also I would offer you this other piece of advice. And then it's implied that he recommends Jorah go and make peace with Sansa. And here's what Daenerys said of Tyrion. The reason I recruited him was because he was a good, intelligent, and ruthless when he had to be. He never should have trusted Cersei. And then Sansa throws it back at her and says, well, neither should you. It was great. I like how Daenerys, she tries to implement a number of tactics here that I think is really clever. She starts by drawing the similarities between the two of them. Hey, we're both women who have been pushed around because we're women, and then we have risen to the occasion and are no longer taking orders from men. In fact, we rule over the men who put us down. And then she tries the love angle. This is Dany trying very hard to both be transparent and honest while also deploying multiple tactics to try to get and break that cold, cool exterior that Sansa's had this season. And you know what? She doesn't quite crack it. And I think this is really critical setup. Austin, we're going to start with you. What did you make of this exchange?
Yeah, I mean, it was a demonstration of someone who's still, despite everything, very much a novice in her political career in Daenerys. Versus someone who has been living this since she was a child, basically, and has been trained by one of the best in Littlefinger in terms of how to navigate a political situation and get what you want. Sansa's still a master at it. She's probably one of the best in Westeros. And Daenerys, I think, in this scene realized that how powerful Sansa is, and hopefully realizes how far she still has yet to go.
I really, really enjoyed this scene a lot. I felt like, Daenerys kind of comes in and she kind of, she's clearly trying to make amends with Sansa, but she's kind of coming at it in this way where like she's superior in a way almost. And Sansa responds by saying, no, like in a weird way, like, no, we're equals. And obviously Daenerys does not like that. And I feel like, again, I mentioned earlier with Daenerys kind of overshadowing what Sansa had to say about Jaime. We see that here where she's, again, kind of Sansa, makes her statements, and Dany is not happy with that. She doesn't see her as someone who's going to be willing to bend the knee or whatever. And she's, as she even says in this scene, her one goal her whole life has been to get the throne. And she's sort of taken this sidestep and to do all these things in the North. But in her head, all of this is still part of her plan to eventually take the throne. She's not able to give that up. Whereas Sansa, is able to look at her and say, she obviously responds by saying, what about the North? Are we willing to bend? But Sansa sees herself, and I think rightfully so, as an equal to Dany, as an opposite to her, not as someone who's like underneath her and ready to give in to whatever Dany wants. And so it was also really exciting to see two, strong, powerful women politically talking about how they're going to rule their lands in a world where that's not even supposed to be a thing, where it's only ruled by kings and males. I know we have Queen Cersei too, but that's not where we started, and so to see them both come to this spot where they are the leaders and their perspective for their perspective people, I think is super exciting. And Game of Thrones has always done a really good job of creating strong female characters, and I think it's just a really, really well done scene seeing these two characters interact with each other.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agreed. And a huge shout out to Sophie Turner, man. She's always been incredible, man. These last 2 seasons, these last 2 episodes, she's been top notch, and I think she was on full display here, really flexing her acting muscles just to show how in control she can be. Really, really top notch stuff. Ben, what did you make of this scene?
I don't know that I have a lot to add, in the sense that I think you guys have already sort of hit on everything that I liked about this scene. I love the power struggle between these two. This is never going to be a comfortable pairing. I don't think, I would predict that this series ends and they're never going to like each other, in part because they do represent sort of the same things. They represent, powerful women who have been through trauma, who are very protective of their families and are very protective of their positions because they fought extremely hard to make sure that those positions were secured. It's never going to be a comfortable pairing. They're never going to like each other. I will also echo what you said, however, about Sophie Turner in this scene and in this season in general. Sansa was not a character that I liked for the first couple seasons of this show. And I think part of that is by design, because her arc is very much going from this naive, sort of entitled, prissy girl who wants nothing more than to be a princess and be looked up to and wear pretty clothes and marry a king, to becoming completely entrenched in the dark realities of the world and becoming her own woman. And I think that character arc is one of the more underrated sort of centerpieces of this show, but her performance as well.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree with you on that point. I think we were talking about this in our little preview episode earlier this year, so I don't want to be too redundant, but as I rewatched the entire show, that arc is consistent. It's between her, Theon, and Jaime, they undergo the most radical changes, and it spans the entire show. And the payoffs, every step of the way, the payoffs are just incredible and consistent. But yeah, I agree. I do think Sansa was by design, much like Jaime in a lot of ways was designed, and Theon. Yeah, all 3 of those characters were designed to not be likable people. Entitlement, I think, runs consistent between the 3 of them. And I do want to bring it back to Daenerys for a second, though, on that note of entitlement, which is she is going back to what Daniel's saying. She's approached the entire North as if it's already hers, talking about entitlement. And I think that's why this pairing is so uneasy. They're not talking like they're equals. Sansa, I think, might be a little more willing to meet her there, but the thing is, Dany will not bend. She will not fold. This is mine. How are you going to help me get it? And Sansa says, hey, I don't really know you. I don't trust you, really. This is our land, and we worked and we fought. We died for this land. Why is it yours? You have done nothing to earn this, which I think kind of echoes the sentiment we've seen earlier in the season, or even through the show. In the North, you have to earn that reputation and earn that respect. And Daenerys wants to step in and just assume everybody will give it to her, which is something that I will say is a consistent character flaw. In some ways, that's a strength, because it's what's gotten that sort of determination is what has gotten her to where she's at now. But on the flip side, it's somewhat of a character flaw to assume that everyone is going to give her things along the way. Another thing that stood out in my rewatch was the way she would approach people, and of course these armies are going to bow down to me and worship me. And I think, and the reason I'm talking about this is I do think all of that is, it's going to be really interesting to see how all that comes to a head in the last couple of episodes. Are they going to like each other in the end? Probably not. But the question I'm throwing out there is, are they both even going to be around? Can they survive together? Can they live in the same world at the same time? And based on what we've seen in this episode from Dany, both with Jon and Sansa here, I don't think they can. I don't think they can occupy Westeros at the same time when it's all said and done. Well, let's go ahead and move on to Theon returns to Winterfell. So that scene ends. Sansa is notified that there's been a visitor arrives. Yes, and none other than Theon Greyjoy has come back, and he says that I will fight for Winterfell if you'll have me. And we just get a really emotional reunion between Sansa. Sansa walks over to Theon and gives him a hug, and that is just it's great stuff. I don't know what there's a lot to say about this scene other than that I was teary, weepy-eyed the whole time. Ben, what did you think of this reunion to see Theon return to Winterfell?
Yeah, it made me, if absolutely nothing else, and there was certainly more to it, but it made me realize how long it had been since Theon had like properly even been in Winterfell. It has been such an unbelievable ride for him, and it made me wonder. I mean, maybe you guys can answer this for me. I'm drawing a blank on it. When is the last time that Theon and Sansa would have even seen each other?
He saved her from Ramsay Bolton.
But that was the end of season 5, though, so that was still like 3 seasons ago.
It's been a while. And I know that was sort of the big redemptive moment for him. So, in terms of their relationship, so, it rings so completely true to me that she would be so overjoyed to see him again. And it would be such an emotional reunion. Man, I am glad that, after seasons of promising that maybe Theon was back to his old self, or was at least like a self-sufficient, member of society, that he's kind of stepping up, and not to minimize what he's been through, because the amount of PTSD that man has to have, no one in their right mind would be able to function beyond that. But they have been sort of teasing this Theon wakes up and comes back to life moment for multiple seasons, it feels like, and it stuck after the end of last season. So I'm excited to see what happens for him in the future. And it's just so cool to see everybody back together, even if it's for the last time, and even if it's not going to end well for any of them. It is wonderful to see these two together and have that reminder that, oh yeah, Theon is part of the family.
And it actually leads me to another scene. I guess we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but when in a couple scenes later, when Theon says to Bran, I took Winterfell. That's another thing. His reunion with Bran was a big one too, because he was the guy who came in and took Winterfell from Bran, which had forced Bran to run away, which led to him becoming, the three-eyed raven. So again, really critical. Theon screwed a lot of lives up in those earlier seasons. But I thought that was also really powerful. I took Winterfell for you, but now I'm going to fight and protect it for you. And I feel like at this point, Theon has, I hate to say it, because seeing him come full circle, full redemption, his whole arc has been very redemptive, and this is kind of the last swan song for him. I'm pretty sure he's going to die next episode. I don't feel like there's anywhere else for him to go but to die. Austin, what do you think?
You just really just said what I was going to say was these couple moments between Bran and Sansa, and really the rest of the Starks, kind of wraps up Theon's storyline. As much as I hate to say it, I think it is with the intention that he has lived a full life at this point and probably won't live a much longer one. And that's sad, but I'm glad to see him finally get this kind of full redemption for the things that he did. And I think he is one of the most tragic characters in the series, and really one of the best written characters, up there with like Cersei and Jaime and Tyrion. in terms of the arc that he has traveled, and Sansa as well, through just all this hardship, and really to come around and be like a full person again. I think he's up there in the handful of like best characters of the show.
You guys have nailed it. You're totally right. This is a really short, quick scene, but it's probably my favorite moment of this whole episode. Just especially on rewatch, as Caleb mentioned, his arc is so well written and consistent the whole time. He became one of my favorite characters when I was rewatching it, even more so than he was the first time, just because the tragic levels of his character, and how far away he drops from who Theon really is, and to see him come back out of that, this is just a beautiful moment. And as you said, Caleb, I was watery eyed as this moment happened, having his arc starting to come full circle. Another thing I'll mention, as I've pointed it out in the last couple scenes with Dany, again, you see this character showing up not to fight for her, but because of Sansa. And Dany has to sit there and watch as they have this very emotional reunion, and Dany's just sitting there awkwardly in the background, kind of like, observing this happen. She doesn't have any moments like this. She doesn't have a character that's she has this type of a relationship with. And I think all these things are weighing on her, clearly weighing on her, and we kind of get her climactic end of this episode when she has her conversation with Jon later in the episode. But Theon, and Yara had kind of said they were going to support her, but the reason he comes back is not for Dany, it is for Sansa, and Yara does not return either. And so I think that's another kind of blow to Dany that she's kind of taking, and she's observing that, as we've already kind of talked about, it's not going to be as simple as that. There's a real bond that's here that she is not a part of and that she doesn't have. And I don't know if she's going to be able to. In fact, I would say she's not going to be able to break through to that. So I think that's another aspect to the scene on top of the already beautiful moment between Theon and Sansa.
Conquer from a foreign land, I suppose. Maybe you could conquer the countryside, but you don't really have any friends in the process. And I think Dany's feeling out of place, and I think rightfully so. Now we're going to move along very quickly. Got a lot of ground to cover here. So we do have that scene, a nice little moment with Davos, who reminds him of Shireen Baratheon. They even had a nice little cue to the music, her theme back before she got burned. And then we have, and she, of course, is going to go fight down in the crypt because she's a fighter. And at that time, Ed Tullett, Beric Dondarrion, and Tormund arrive at Winterfell to tell everyone that they have until sunrise tomorrow, with, of course, Tormund getting the last word. Is the big woman still here? He's mugging the camera so hard at every point in this episode. I don't think there's actually a lot to talk about there, so I'm more interested in talking about the next scene, which is kind of the big battle strategy meeting. So it looks like the plan is to lure the Night King into a trap, because they kind of remind us that, if you kill one of the generals, a bunch of his people fall, but if you kill the Night King, theoretically that would wipe out the entire army. Bran believes the Night King is after him and the Three-Eyed Raven, because the Three-Eyed Raven, I guess this is the closest thing we've gotten to an explanation for what the Three-Eyed Raven does, is to store all of the history of Westeros, to have all the memories. And as Sam poses the question, or poses the idea, that's death, isn't it? Being forgotten. And if we forget where we've been or what we've done, we're not men anymore, just animals. And he goes on, but it seems like this is the closest we've gotten to a motivation for the Night King and a purpose for the Three-Eyed Raven. The Three-Eyed Raven is here to store the memories, store the histories of Westeros, while the Night King apparently just wants to wipe out all of civilization in a very apocalyptic-like fashion. I'm not super satisfied with that if that's all we get, but we will see. We also have kind of a lot of back and forths here between Tyrion and Dany about who's going to be where. So what did you guys make of this kind of battle strategy scene? Felt a little more traditional fantasy, something we'd see in another traditional fantasy novel or film. Ben, we'll start with you on this one.
Okay, so this goes back to something that we discussed earlier in terms of what Bran's motivations are, or what his potential end game is. And I think at this point, he is the only character that we have to reliably tell us what it is that the Night King actually wants. Now, whether or not we take that as gospel, I suppose, is going to be totally dependent on what we see in the weeks ahead. The Night King is an interesting character or concept, I should say, in the sense that we don't really know how conscious he really is. He is somebody who has created and accrued a vast army to fight under him. But is he somebody with complex motivations? This is maybe the first real, I don't want to say inkling, but this is like the first confirmation that it seems we have that there is something specifically that he is after, which is to erase all trace of the living world. Is it a satisfying explanation? I'm not so sure. But that doesn't come from a place of cynicism or pessimism so much as I feel like it's going to be a wait and see sort of thing in terms of what we see as the Night King's motivations, especially next week. Is this trap that they're setting by setting Bran, out in the open, going to be something that he goes for, or is he really not so concerned with the Three-Eyed Raven in particular, and he's more concerned about just causing maximum destruction?
It is time for us to check in and hear about the results of this week's Fantasy League.
So as you may or may not remember, last year we did a Game of Thrones Fantasy League where we draft characters from the show, and they are all given points based on things that happen in the show. The 5 categories are violence.
Any man dies with a clean sword, I'll rape his fucking corpse!
Sex and nudity.
The gods made this, and it delights me.
Wits and schemes.
Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder.
Status and power.
Power is power.
And finally, drinking and eating.
I understand that if any more words come pouring out your cunt mouth, I'm gonna have to eat every fucking chicken in this room.
Those characters' points are all added up, and our team scores come from the collective points from all the characters we drafted. I'm still the reigning champion, and as such, I'm the ruler of this league. Unfortunately, right now, Caleb is in the lead with 325 points, followed not so closely by myself and Daniel Stahl, both with 220 points. Right now, the number 1 point scorer for this past week was Arya, and our MVP via The Verge, kind of taking a look at the episode as a whole, performed most admirably. It's kind of an arbitrary thing, was Brienne, which frankly I think was a pretty good choice. Brienne had a really good week, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So right now, Caleb has a very commanding lead. I do think a lot of his characters might kick the bucket next week, so he might...
Hey man, it's all about it's all about those points. I knew that going in, these people were going to bite it, but you know what? It's all about getting as many points as possible before they're off the board. There's only 6 episodes.
They will perform well for the first 3 episodes. I don't think they're going to do a whole lot for you the last 3. So we'll see what happens.
It's all about the end game, just like Avengers. It's all about the end game. So that's where my points are coming in.
We're in the end game now. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Oh my God! All right. Well, gentlemen, you guys have fought honorably and nobly, but you just don't really stand a chance against my secret weapon. I haven't even played the big guy yet. My Hulk is still in the banner bod. The Night King has not emerged to take out all of your people.
You know who else hasn't emerged, despite being heavily featured? Sam Tarley, 0 points, has done actually quite a bit 0 points. I regret that draft entirely.
Don't worry, Austin. The first 3 White Walkers will definitely be killed by Sam somehow, some way.
It so much, guys.
He stole some books, man. I mean, he's definitely a badass.
I'm so upset right now, like really upset. Pretty much the status quo as it was from last week. I think we'll see a bit of a shakeup next week as the dragons get involved.
You don't fight with honor.
No, he did.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Austin. Let's go ahead. We're going to move quickly because we've got a lot of ground to cover and not a lot of time. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw a couple of little. We're going to talk about a couple of scenes at a time, and then I'm going to ask you guys if there was anything in particular that stood out to you about those scenes. Because there are a lot of very tiny vignettes between people here, with a couple of really big notable ones I want to talk about. But first and foremost, the two I want to kick off with is we have Missandei and Grey Worm making out. Grey Worm asking you, is there anything else you want to do with your life? Basically what I'm saying is Grey Worm signs his death warrant. In fact, he might have been so sappy and so promising that he signed both of their death warrants if we're not careful. So so we've got that scene, and then another scene we have is Jon, Sam, and Ed on the Winterfell wall, kind of reminiscing about where they came from. A lot of good jokes. Sam Tarly gets shit on by my boy Ed, who got me 5 points for having a good one-liner. Samwell Tarly, slayer of White Walkers, lover of ladies, as if we needed more evidence that the world was ending. But we also got a nice nod back to Grin and Pip and all the people who died from the Night's Watch. Again, very reminiscent, very weirdly emotional. I never really liked the Night's Watch stories that much, but like those are characters I did like a lot. So it just warms the heart and saddens the heart a little bit that they're not here now. And then of course we have Arya and the Hound on the castle wall, also on the wall in a different position, talking about, what are you doing here? When did you grow a heart? When did you start fighting for something or anything? And then the Hound throws it at her and says, fighting for you. I fought for you. And we got a nice little back and forth whenever Beric Dondarrion showed up. And the Hound got the good one-liner. Well, Thoros isn't here anymore, so you better not be giving a sermon. Those are 3 different scenes we hit on there. Did anything in particular stand out to you guys about any of those 3 scenes?
I mean, I think the general thing is you can bet that any scene, any heartwarming moment you've had with a character in this episode probably means they're going to be dead. I think the Hound might be one of those exceptions. I think he has more to do in later episodes. But when you see scenes with Beric and some of the others it's their send-off. So enjoy it while you can, because next week they may not be around anymore.
Ben, anything else to add about any of those scenes?
No, just going off what Austin said, this is actually maybe my biggest criticism of this episode. There are an absurd amount of I'm 2 days from retirement in this episode, with Jon and Sam and Ed talking about how they're the last 3 left. There's a reasonably good chance. I would say that Ed is probably gone in the next episode. There's always the chance that Sam is gone in the next episode. I doubt Jon is gone in the next episode, but hell, if they really wanted to surprise us. But yeah, with that scene, and then with Beric and the Hound, they keep going back to this idea that, well, Thoros isn't here anymore, so you're on your last life. He's going to use that last life relatively soon, you would imagine. He's cheated death one too many times. And then with Missandei and Grey Worm, I don't know which one of those is going to die. My guess, my money is probably on Grey Worm. Any series or film, when a couple has a moment where they talk about, oh, and when this is all over, we're going to go and we're going to see the beach, and we're going to be so happy and in love together. I'm like, they are done. They gone. So, yeah, I mean, these were all scenes that I was glad that we had. I'm glad that these characters got to have these interactions. But yes, it very much feels like, it feels like they've all got crosshairs on them.
Daniel, anything else?
I mean, yeah, you guys covered it. These characters are definitely dead because of all the heartwarming moments. And just a quick note on the Men of the Wall. It does feel like, as much as maybe some of their storylines were kind of not on the same par as some other storylines, it does feel like they have a true brotherhood, unlike a lot of the other characters in the show, which was really nice to see. Like, they really do feel like they are brothers, and that really comes out in that scene. So that was really a nice touch to that scene. But yeah, I agree with you guys. Most of these characters are probably gone, and that's why we have these nice little moments.
Yeah, and I'd be daft if I didn't mention that Ghost made a cameo appearance. The first time he's appeared on the show in several seasons. So I think we're going to get some Ghost on White Walker action next episode. Maybe he can rip out their throats or something. I'm going to jump around a little bit here. I'm actually going to move to next Arya and Gendry. Now, this has been a point of, I guess, mild criticism, or a little bit of internet fighting, or conflicts online. Arya and Gendry. Arya decides, after she's done talking to the Hound, that she's like, yeah, I'm not going to die with you old farts. I'm going to get laid, because I haven't done that yet. So she goes and gets the weapon from Gendry, and she says, we're probably going to die tonight, and before that happens, I want to know what it feels like. And my reaction was, wow, this escalated quickly. Wow, this is weirdly appropriate, and whoa, this is not something I ever expected to see on Game of Thrones. Arya, who, of course, we saw as a little girl, now in a full-grown adult, kind of losing her virginity. I want to get you guys' take on this really quickly. Controversial. That was the word I was looking for. It has stirred some internet controversy. Arya having sex with Gendry, despite the fact that I feel like in earlier seasons we shipped them pretty hard. Everybody did. So, Austin, let's start with you. You seem to be the most vocal critic of that particular scene today. I want to get your take first.
I did not dislike it for the reasons that most of Twitter disliked it. I disliked it because I felt like it was really forced. It felt like fan fiction. I mean, we've had that criticism of other scenes in the past, and it very much felt like that to me. Which to me begs the question is, if it is forced, and that's based on my own assumptions, who here from this scene dies in the next episode? Is that Gendry? Is that Arya? Is that both? I think it very well may be both die next episode. Overall, I mean, it was fine. I didn't think it was all that exciting. I didn't think it was necessarily worthy of controversy. I just thought it was really like an unnecessary scene overall.
Okay. All right. So Austin, not a fan, felt like fan fiction. I have thoughts on that, but I'm going to throw it to Daniel Stoll first. What did you think of Arya and Gendry hooking up?
I really like the scene. I don't necessarily think it was anything phenomenal, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it humanizes Arya a little bit. We've talked a lot about Arya in the last couple of seasons. Is she's just some revenge-seeking, ruthless killing machine with, is she even human anymore? But you see her humanity here a little bit, and obviously she's very awkward about it. She's asking him about his past, and it comes out as very awkward, but I think that's very intentional. Arya has gone through a whole heck of a lot, and she is this very, she's gone down this very dark path, and it's very weird at this point to see her trying to have like a normal kind of conversation. And as she is an adult woman at this point, and she has every right to kind of express herself in whatever way she wants, but she's just gone down this path that has really traumatized her in a lot of ways, and so she has a difficult time expressing her feelings or her emotions in this moment, and so it comes out as very awkward. But I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's executed really well. And it's, for Game of Thrones, it's even kind of it's not as it gets way worse in a Game of Thrones with nudity and things like that. And I think the way that it was handled was handled very well from a production side of things. So yeah, I really like the scene. I think it makes a lot of sense for Arya's character. and even humanizes her in a way. So yeah, I thought the scene was fitting.
Very fitting. Okay, so we've got Austin says fan service. Daniel says not fan service. Sorry, fan fiction. Daniel says fitting. Ben, friend, what did you make of the scene with Arya and Gendry?
Somewhere in between Austin and Daniel on this, because I do think that this was absolutely, I don't know if I would call it fan fiction, but it certainly is fan service. And it may be fan service aimed at exactly the people who write Arya Gendry / fan fiction on the internet. That's just not something, that's just not a corner of the internet I know much about. I will say, I think the way that this scene was staged, and I cracked a joke about this earlier about how in episode 69, how did we get like the tamest possible sex scene? But I really do think that there is like a real, I don't want to say class about it, but this is a show that has had some pretty exploitative sex scenes and has at times had sort of a problematic relationship with sexuality in general. That said, I think in this scene, what you see Arya, who's a character who's been through so much that she's not vulnerable to anybody, finding herself with one of the only people that she's ever really trusted and perhaps loved, and she's completely vulnerable to him in her way. And I think, intentionally or not, the way that it's staged and the fact that there is no outright nudity, especially on the part of we don't see much of Maisie Williams at all. I think it goes a long way towards me reading the scene as, well, look, Arya's not even being vulnerable towards even the audience. The only person who can see her completely stripped down is Gendry. So this is a moment between the two of them where they are being completely vulnerable with one another, and it's a moment completely for them. So I've thought about this scene a lot today, and part of that is the Twitter controversies, because isn't everything a Twitter controversy? And the controversy seems to be, oh my God, she's a child, we shouldn't be seeing this. We saw her when she was a child, and now they're taking advantage of her. I'd say this is the furthest thing from taking advantage of the character or the actress. I feel like this was a scene that was meticulously planned, and I think thematically, the way that it was staged is as good as you could possibly want a scene like this to be staged.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Ben. I'm probably pretty closely aligned with Daniel. I mean, I feel like it's organic, right? So, yes, it's been several seasons since Arya and Gendry saw each other, but that's really the closest thing she ever had to a vague sense of romance when she was much younger. So that makes sense. Is it a little fanficky? Yeah, maybe. But I mean, I don't feel like there was no other candidates. And seeing them reunite was something that I know a lot of fans, myself included, were looking forward to. It's her last night on Earth. She's a person who's seen a lot of shit. She committed genocide on an entire family. She's brutally murdered multiple people. She at one point thought her entire family was dead or dying. She has lost all sense of innocence in any way. But yet there is this one piece of her that remains untapped, which is her sexuality. And this is for her at that, realizing that she actually might not have another chance, wanting to explore that with someone she does care about as much as she could care about anybody who's not, a member of her family. So I found it to be very appropriate. Yes, I thought it was very consensual. I thought that the way it was framed and shot was probably one of the most tasteful ways any sex scene has been shot on Game of Thrones. And Ben, I'm not going to restate what you said, but this show has had a very complicated past with the way it portrays sex and sexual exploitation and rape and sexual assault. So I thought this was actually a great way for this to happen. And I do want to remind listeners out there too, Maisie Williams is an adult. She is, I think, 21, 22. And then Arya, while probably not quite 22 years old, is an adult at this point in the series. So I don't think, she's young. Yeah, it's kind of weird because we've seen her since she was a little girl. But in reality, she's a woman. She's an adult. So I don't really feel like there's too much off here about it. And unlike Austin, I do feel like it's very earned, even if it's been a long gap since Arya and Gendry saw each other. Well, we've got a couple big scenes left. The one small one I want to hit on really quickly is that we do get Lady Lyanna Mormont makes an appearance in this week's episode. Jorah Mormont confronts her, begging her to go wait and stay down in the crypts, as she is the future of the house. And if she is to go, then there will be no more Mormont house. And he fails because Lady Mormont is a badass and says, "Are you kidding me? I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight to protect our family." Wow, good stuff. And it's followed immediately by Sam coming and giving Jorah Mormont's sword Sam giving his father's Valyrian sword to Jorah Mormont, saying, "Your father, Jorah Mormont, taught me how to be a man. So I want to pass this along to you and your fight against the dead." Neat little scene. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but did you guys have anything in particular that stood out to you about this?
I mean, just that Lyanna Mormont is one of the most criminally underutilized characters in the series so far. It wasn't really anything like crazy happened here, but it was great to see her again. I wish we'd saw more of her.
Do you think she's going to make it?
No, nobody makes it. Everybody's dead.
Okay. Sticking with that thought, everyone's dead. What Daniel, Ben, just quickly, do you think Lyanna Mormont's going to make it out of the Battle of Winterfell alive?
Unfortunately, I think she's probably dead. I wish we could have seen more of her, as Austin said, but yeah, she's gone, I think.
Yep, I'm with you guys. Unfortunately, I think that she's a criminally underrated character and underutilized on this show. But I am very, very glad that even if it's a short scene, that we can have these two characters together, knowing that they're cousins and knowing that, they're the last of their house. So, you can't kind of just have them, be ships in the night. I'm glad that they had the foresight to at least bring them together before, one or both of them bites the dust next week.
Yeah, it was a nice touch where it's like Ben, I think you said it at the top of the episode, having these moments where you say, man, I really hope this character gets to meet this character, and those opportunities very easily could have passed us by if we got so focused on, the plot and heading to the end as fast as possible. But thanks to episodes like this, we were able to get really touching scenes where Jorah and Lady Mormont get to speak. And I don't know. I'm of the mind that one of these people is going to die and one of them is going to live. I think Lady Mormont's not long for this world. I think Jorah might just get out by the skin of his teeth, but I don't know. I think him making a noble sacrifice also makes a good deal of sense. So let's move on to what was probably my favorite sequence of the episode outside of some of the earlier Jaime stuff, which is where we have Tyrion and Jaime having a drink by the fire. Oh, how I wish Father was here, fighting, protecting Winterfell in our last days. Man, talk about just a really incredible look back on this relationship and these characters. They say it all. Tyrion's kind of speech about the perils of self-betterment. He's like, you remember when I was a whoremonger and you were the Kingslayer who loved his sister? Just really powerful stuff. And I love how it starts with those two and it slowly grows out. Because then we have Brienne and Podrick who join, and they offer him a drink, and Brienne says no. And then, Podrick says half. Tyrion overflows the drink, which got him some fantasy points. And then we have Davos walk in, followed closely by Tormund. And, Tormund's, trying to hit on Brienne. Like, all of that stuff I just thought was fantastic. It was so much fun. Of course, you have the amazing origin story for Tormund Giantsbane. How did he get to be named Giantsbane? I just love those exchanges. It was a little goofy, a little silly, but also lots of fun. And it leads directly into the knighting sequence with Brienne, which I know these are kind of two separate scenes, but I think they work really well together. Again, I think Tyrion saying, well, most of us have survived to fight with the Starks at one point, and here we are. Here all of us are defending Winterfell. We've all been through battles, and he goes on to name each one of the people. Davos survived the Battle of the Bastards and Blackwater. Tormund, you survived going beyond the Wall and the battle at the Wall. I just think, again, really interesting way to demonstrate how, despite how hopeless the situation seems, there's still like a silver lining, which is we have been against odds just as bad or seemingly worse than this, and somehow we all managed to make it to this point. So somehow we might be able to get out of this once again. But Brienne, I think, talking about being a knight, saying that she doesn't want to be a knight, and Tormund saying, how could you possibly not be a knight with all your incredible battle? And Jaime calls bullshit and is like, no, you want to be a knight. And then the way that the whole scene works together, you have Gendry who kind of gives the nod and is like, oh my gosh, yeah, you do want to be a knight. I like how suddenly and quickly it happens. Jaime says, you know what? Usually it's a king who's granting knighthood, but you don't have to do that. That's tradition. A knight can create a knight. And he goes this whole sequence, which is, just tears, man. Tears. He says, he knights her and says, you are now Ser Brienne of Tarth, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. And I just love how Tyrion like starts this grand applause and it just weepy eyed, right? And that beautiful visual in front of the fireplace, the cheering, the emotions, knowing that this is all Brienne has ever really wanted. And the way that Benioff and Weiss talk about Brienne in this sequence, I thought was really great, as not knowing how to express the emotions of love she has because she's never really had to process love in this way before. Sorry, I don't want to say it all. What did you guys make of this whole gather around the fire sequence? Austin, we'll start with you.
Sure. This is, to me, will probably go down as one of the defining scenes, if not in the season, probably in the series. This like sequence of events that happens in front of the hearth there in Winterfell, almost theatrical, like it was on a play up on a stage, with characters kind of roaming in and out, and you get these just amazing interactions between all these characters that we never really thought we would see together, but always secretly hoped we would. You even had moments, like you said, with Tormund, who brought the comic relief of the scene and then just kind of really let everyone know where he came from and why he became so strong. And then the heartwarming moment there with Brienne. Ultimately, probably not consequential, this scene, but so important to the series as a whole. And really, this type of moment is exactly what makes the series what it is, and as popular as it is. It's so important, and to me is probably one of the best scenes of the entire series.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. It might not be important to the plot, but it is important to the characters, and that's why we care about any of this in the first place. Ben, did you have any thoughts on this sort of gather around the campfire scene?
Yeah, it's strange because, like Austin was saying, everything that happens around the fire, the conversations between the characters, and then of course the knighting scene, which is sort of like the centerpiece of the episode. These scenes will be like among the like iconic and beloved and most memorable and impactful scenes of the series once all is said and done. I think there's just no doubt about it. But in that way, you go like, man, what do you say that hadn't already been said? I mean, it seems like everybody has pretty well agreed, and especially among us who had varying feelings of positivity about the episode, that this is the show operating at its absolute best, and this is exactly the scene or the set of scenes that I'm so glad to have, and I will be so unbelievably thrilled to have once the show is said and done. I don't feel like there's a whole lot to add to it, except it's incredibly emotional, and I think particularly the knighting scene and just the image of Jaime standing over Brienne. I think that's going to be one of like the defining images of this series, just without a doubt in my head. Yeah.
God, just emotional. Tears over my eyes. Just thinking about it. Jeez. Daniel, anything you would like to add about these set of scenes?
I mean, you guys have definitely covered it. It's an absolutely beautiful sequence, and it starts off as this fun, lighthearted kind of thing and turns into this very, very emotional, provocative moment with Brienne. And so, and you have Tyrion saying, like, it's so just kind of incredible where we're at in the show. You have Tyrion says most of them have fought against the Starks at one point, and now they're all here. And you have all these characters that were once on different sides. Maybe at one point they hated each other even, but now they're all here together. They've decided to band together and take on this one last final fight in their eyes. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful scene. As you guys have mentioned, it's going to be one that we remember forever. And it's very emotional. And just even to see, I don't know if we've ever seen Brienne smile, in that way. And when you see that, as you said, Caleb, just tears come to your eye because you know how meaningful that moment is to her. She has been the most knightly, as we said earlier, of any of the characters on the show. And so for her to finally achieve that moment is just, it's absolutely beautiful. And I think, that is that completes her arc, and she probably is going to die in the next episode. But for her, she achieved what she wanted in life, and her of all of the characters deserved to have that moment. So I was so happy for her to have that. So absolutely beautiful scene.
Right, and Jaime Lannister being the one who would do nothing but shit talk her and trash talk her, being in the beginning, being the one to knight her with like honor and I don't know, a big humbling scene for him again. Another way for him to humble himself while simultaneously giving Brienne the thing she's wanted her whole life, is to be a knight and to serve a king. So yeah, this will be one of the Game of Thrones is oftentimes thought of as Red Wedding, Mountain Viper, all those big iconic deathly scenes. But I think when the dust settles, there are going to be a handful of scenes that are a little more positive and a little more the character moments that are going to be actually positive and beneficial and fulfilling. I think this is one of them that's going to stand out.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the last time that I felt a scene in this show as like something that was going to be like so profoundly important to like the legacy and like the memory of this show, it's probably been since Tyrion's trial and his monologue in that episode, demanding the trial by combat. That is probably the most comparable scene that I can think of in terms of something where there isn't a lot of action, there isn't there aren't heads and limbs flying everywhere, but it's a moment entirely dependent on an interaction between characters, on good dialogue, and an understanding of the world that these characters inhabit. So yeah.
No, I think that's I think you're dead on. And most of these scenes are, even the character driven ones are channeled by negative emotions or tragedy or something. And this is one of the few that's, I think, a little more positive and uplifting. And yet, despite how happy and heartwarming and beautiful this scene is, it's still incredibly somber because it's all living in the shadow of knowing what's coming next. And I think that's why it works so beautifully. You're happy about it. We're happy. We're cheering with Tyrion and clapping. My audience, in our house, we even clapped. But we all know, everyone knows deep down though that what's coming next is not going to be happy. So it's so bittersweet. And this is going to take us to, we have to acknowledge that we got Podrick singing a song, Jenny of the Old Stones, which there's already been a cover of this performed by Florence and the Machine that's posted online. It's terrific. This reminded me a lot of the Pippin sing in Return of the King. He sings before Denethor, right as his son Faramir is charging into like a suicide attack on these orcs. So very reminiscent of that for me. And I like how it's kind of a montage. We get to see, some people like Sam are just laying in bed awake with the ones he loves. You have Sansa and Theon who are enjoying one last meal. Arya, who is kind of, I don't know, she's with Gendry, but seems like she's not at ease. And you have, Grey Worm and Jorah, who are already getting a head start marching out to the battlefield, just showing where all these people are positioned. And, the night before this epic historic event that's probably going to mean the end of most of their lives. But let's go ahead and move on to, I think, the other really major scene for the week, which is Jon reveals his heritage to Dany. And they meet in the crypt in front of Lyanna Stark's statue. And one thing that stuck out to me was that Dany believed that Rhaegar raped Lyanna, and then Jon had to set the record straight, which is that he is actually Aegon Targaryen. He has the rightful claim to the throne. And then Dany points out, a secret no one in the world except your brother and your best friend knew. Does this not seem strange to you in any way? Guys, I don't think this is kind of the moment. I know we were kind of hinting at it last episode, but I think it's becoming increasingly clear to me that Dany is not going to back down from that throne for anything. It doesn't matter what's put in front of her. This is her manifest destiny. This is the thing she has worked her whole life for. She's been through so much to get there. So for Jon Snow at the end of the line, someone she's allegedly fallen in love with, I'm not totally sure I buy it, but allegedly had fallen in love with, to say, well, actually, I'm the rightful heir. Even though I don't think he wants it, his noble duty and honor are going to compel him to try to push for it when the time comes.
I would say, I mean, she hasn't really been presented with any actual evidence yet, and her criticisms of it are completely valid. Literally, it's Bran and Sam, and that's it. That's the only people who know it. She hasn't seen any documents, anything like that. And so in her mind, she feels like maybe Jon's being led along by people who are trying to manipulate him. In the end, I don't know if Dany very much... This is what she felt was her destiny from the beginning. I think she is still a reasonable person despite everything. And I think she would back down. But at the same time, I don't think Jon's interested in the throne. I don't think he cares. Nor do I think he will ever be king. So it's just the criticism of Dany's reaction here, I think is a little unfair considering the evidence that's presented before her, on top of the fact that she had already kind of made herself a little vulnerable by criticizing her own family to begin with acknowledging that Rhaegar had raped Lyanna, which we know was not actually the case now. So I think she was coming in trying to be a really supportive person and made herself a little vulnerable, and got thrown this in her face all of a sudden and was presented with no real evidence of it. So I think we should cut Dany a little slack here, but at the same time, it will be really interesting to see how she reacts to this down the road. Ultimately, I think she'll be all right.
It could even influence the outcome of the battle. If she thinks this person might get in her way, she might be less compelled to help him and when the moment comes. I don't know. We'll see.
I think that's what they're leading to, but at the same time, I hope that's not the case. That feels like it's not giving the character of Dany enough credit.
I don't know, man. I don't know. And by the way, it's not a criticism. I'm just saying of her because we've been with her that whole journey. So I'm not necessarily criticizing her, but that kind of conquering entitled mindset is how she's made it this far. And I don't know. I guess this scene was just evidence to me that, not a criticism of her, but that's just who she is. And I don't know that anything Jon does or says is going to change that. And if we're not careful, if this story goes in a certain direction, Dany is going to have to make a decision about Jon, whether she wants the throne or him more. Maybe that won't happen though.
Yeah. I mean, Jon does not even get a chance to tell her, that he is not at all interested in becoming the king. He doesn't care if he is the rightful heir. He doesn't care if the world even necessarily knows this. This is just something that he needed to make sure that she understood because, not only are they, close confidants politically, but they had been romantically involved. And so this is obviously something that she deserves to know. I hope I'm with Austin. I hope that we are not leading to a situation where this is going to be something that determines the outcome of the battle next week. That being said, I don't know that I necessarily think it would be out of character, or rather like an unfair arc to put Dany's character on to make her make one final really difficult decision about what she will do to secure her place on the Iron Throne. So I don't know. I for now, I trust them with what they're doing here, but it's obviously intentional that they did not get a chance to hash this out before they're supposed to be fighting side by side. And yeah, I mean, maybe this does set what was, once an uneasy alliance back a little bit if she thinks maybe Jon is gunning for her, which he's not. I think the only thing that would maybe compel anyone to think that he was interested in that is the understanding that definitely Sansa and Sam would definitely would be on his side if he decided that he was more deserving than Dany was of sitting on the throne.
I think, as I've been more focused on a little bit, is all these scenes that people are not on Dany's side throughout the episode, and then we get this scene. And maybe, I'm going to disagree with Austin a little bit here. Maybe I'm being too critical of Dany here, but I'm going to go. I think it's very telling about her character. She's been told her whole life that her family is this crazy family, that they all do all these terrible things, and she is, and I agree with your point, Austin, a little bit that she hasn't been given evidence for that, and that makes sense. But her first reaction to being told that her brother is not a rapist is to say, "Are you sure your information is accurate?" I feel like that's just a little weird. Like, not to be like, "Oh, maybe my family wasn't all so bad." I don't know. Maybe I'm reading a little too much into it, or I'm being too critical of her there. But that is her first reaction. She says, "You have an heir to the you have a claim to the throne." And she doesn't even, she kind of glosses over the fact that that was her brother that she was talking about, and let alone the connection that they have. Now, I agree with you guys completely that Jon is not gunning for that spot, and doesn't seem to really care for that, and they didn't really get to have that conversation. But I think that is very telling about where her mindset is when she finds this information out, is that her immediate reaction is to think, my claim to the throne is now at risk, is her immediate reaction. So I to Caleb's point, I don't know if it'll have an outcome on the actual battle itself, but that's definitely, I think, where the show is trying to send it.
I don't have anything to say about this last scene about the White Walkers other than they all have those dragon killing spears, and the Night King's not there. We don't see him. We don't see Night King. We don't see Viserion. If I was a betting man, I would say the Night King's not even going to be there. Their entire plan is built around the idea that they can take out the Night King, and I don't think he's anywhere near Winterfell. What do you guys think?
Yeah, let's talk about that. There's been a theory floating around the internet, and I am 100% on board with this theory. And I think Daniel Stoll earlier this week presented it to us, and we've all been pretty supportive of it. And it's been kind of floating around. I'm sure a lot of our listeners have even seen it as well. But it is that Night King will not appear at Winterfell, and then he has split his forces. He's sending a very large contingent down to King's Landing to take King's Landing, while he sends a smaller contingent to Winterfell to fight there. The general idea is basically that the forces of good will win at Winterfell, but King's Landing will fall, and the residents of King's Landing will be turned into White Walkers, and then that's where the rest of the battle is going to take place. I think this holds a lot of credence in my mind, especially when you look back at the visions that we've seen in previous seasons with the dragons flying over King's Landing, as well as the Iron Throne covered in snow and ash. You guys have thought on this theory all week. I don't know. To me at this point, it's not even a theory. Like, this is what's going to happen. The Night King wasn't there at the end of the episode. 100% he is going down to King's Landing right now, and we will not see him in Winterfell in the next episode. What do you guys think?
Yeah, he doesn't have to be out there shuffling with the rest of them. He's got a dragon now. He can go wherever he wants to go. So I'm with you. I have kind of had this kicking around in my head since the last season, honestly. The moment that he got the reliable transport of a dragon, I was like, oh no, all bets are off. He can go wherever he wants to go. Why not go for King's Landing and just, hit him where it hurts?
Yeah, why worry with a small fish like Winterfell when you could just march around them? I mean, Austin, I am a strong supporter of this theory. This show, while I don't think it necessarily, the old saying like history, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and then the alternate saying is that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. I think this show likes to rhyme an awful lot, and I think we saw Robb Stark pull that back in season 1 when he sent some of his men to die at the feet of Tywin Lannister in order to capture Jaime Lannister, and we saw it last season when Jaime Lannister used the same tactic. He sacrificed Casterly Rock in order to take Highgarden. So I would not put it past the Night King to do a very similar thing here, and I'll admit I like that quite a bit more because it goes again. But initially, when I was thinking about how the season was going to go, I was like, all right, I never had any doubt that Battle of Winterfell was episode 3. My assumption was that they were going to lose and then run south and flee and beg for Cersei to let them into the city. And then Jaime would be kind of a really key character in that scenario and how to turn it around. This is more interesting to me because it's more unpredictable. Because like what happens once then if this plays out like we think it will, sure, we're going to lose a lot of characters next week. Some of the good living people will prevail, but then how on earth are they going to fight the zombies down in King's Landing? What is that even going to look like? Is Cersei going to change, turncoat and join their team all of a sudden? Like, I just feel like it's so much more unpredictable and dramatically interesting if that's kind of how it plays out.
I definitely agree that it's more interesting. I don't think I'm as sold on the theory as you guys, which is interesting because I think I'm the one that presented it to you guys as a theory. I'm not as sold on it, but I think it's definitely plausible. And if it does happen, it would be a very interesting way to change the way that or the context of the Night King and his army.
It plays so well in my mind, not only because we didn't even see the Night King at the end of the episode, which you would, in my mind, if he was there at Winterfell, you would feature him, right? Like, oh, this guy's coming. He's the big bad. But because Cersei then gets bitten in the ass for not going up to help at Winterfell, all of King's Landing get wiped out. Presumably she dies along with Euron and everybody else there. It also plays into the whole like fan fiction thing of the Clegane Bowl. You have the Mountain get turned into a zombie, and then the Hound, who, in theory might survive Winterfell, has to come down and fight his White Walkered version of his brother. It plays so well into all the different things that really need to happen to wrap up the series. I love it. I love the theory. And like I said, I think it's not even a theory anymore. It's going to happen.
Bronn is out there somewhere. Maybe he could come to save the day, Han Solo style. I don't know. I expect him to show up somewhere in the next episode, though. All right, gentlemen. Well, thanks so much for doing a review and recap of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. A really spectacular episode. In my mind, one of the best of the series. And before we go and close out the show with a little prehash of next week's episode, I do want to remind you that you can follow the Cast Beyond the Wall on Twitter at cast_beyond_GOT or on Facebook at facebook.com/the Cast Beyond the Wall. And you can also subscribe to the Cast Beyond the Wall by going over to your preferred podcast app or wherever podcasts are found and subscribing. And we would really be extra grateful if you guys would give it a rating and a review. Now, Ben Friend, where can people keep up with you and your work online if they want to hear more of your Game of Thrones thoughts before the season's over?
Sure, absolutely. You can find me on Facebook, Ben Friend. Twitter is twitter.com, B3NFriend. And on Instagram at B3NFriend, just Ben Friend with the 3 instead of an E. Would love to talk to any of you guys anytime about anything, man. Doing this show has always been such a highlight of my year. It's not a proper season of Game of Thrones without it, and even without the show to keep us kicking around. I'd love to hear from any of you guys.
Ben, thanks for being a guest on this show over the years and sticking around every year consistently, man. You're a good one. You're a good one of the good friends out there. No pun intended. I promise that was not a pun intended. But no, thanks for joining again this year. I'm sure we'll find other podcast ventures out there to keep you looped in and part of the conversation. Well, gentlemen, let's close out as we always do, prehashing next week. And by prehashing, I basically mean we can't do jack shit right now because there's no titles, there's no descriptions, no even vague descriptions that are pretending to tease us what's happening next week. So here's what I'm going to do instead. First, I just want to note that according to the producers and director Miguel Sapochnik, this is supposed to be the quote-unquote longest battle ever shot for television or film. They're saying it's longer than any single battle in the Lord of the Rings movies, including Helm's Deep. So that's pretty big shoes to fill. The episode is an hour and 22 minutes long, and that does not include like the pre and post show. So I think it's going to be one you're going to want to buy a lot of popcorn and tissues for. No, Miguel Sapochnik is the director who directed such classic Game of Thrones as Hardhome and the Battle of the Bastards and the Winds of Winter, some of the most iconic, like actiony event episodes we've ever seen on the show. But to close out the episode, instead of trying to predict it like we have throughout this week, I'm just going to ask you guys a simple question. 3 people who are not going to walk out of next week's episode. Austin Lucari, we'll start with you.
Tormund, Theon, and Brienne.
All right. Placing the bets here. Daniel Stoll, we'll throw it to you.
Well, Austin took 2 of mine, but there's so many characters that are going to die, it's not going to matter. I'm going to throw out Beric. Dondarrion's going to die. Grey Worm will die, and Jorah will die, just to be different than Austin. But I was going to pick Theon and Brienne as well. So,
okay, so that's 6 dead people right there. Ben Friend, 3 people that you think are going to bite it in the next episode.
I hate to say that so many of them have been taken. I'll say the big one that hasn't been said is Arya. I think next week, I think that's it for her. But I also think Brienne, and I think Grey Worm for sure.
You guys have said all the great ones, but Brienne to me, that one's the one that's the most like almost. That one's. There's no way that doesn't happen. I mean, that would be a true Game of Thrones shock if she weren't to die and like Jaime were to die in her place, for example. Grey Worm is definitely dead. I want to throw out Ed from the Night's Watch, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Of the 3 men on the wall, I think he is easily the most likely to die. It's going to be sad. A character I never knew I was emotionally attached to in any way until the last couple of seasons, and it's going to be really sad to see him go, but I'm certain he's not going to make it out. So are we right? What predictions turned out accurate? You guys can find out by tuning into next week's episode when we recap and review Season 8, Episode 3. Thank you so much for tuning into our recap of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Join us next week when we continue once again going beyond the wall.